So hi, welcome. I'm Emily from the Springville Museum of Art, and I'm here with Danielle Susi, and this is going to be an artist Q&A as part of our Artist to Artist program that is through Reimagine Teaching and POPs, professional outreach programs in the schools. And we're so excited to talk to Danielle about her art and her career. So Danielle, do you want to start off by just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about the art that you make?
Yeah, I'm Danielle Susi. I am a writer, but I'm also a fiber artist, and fiber can mean lots of different things. I think when people hear fiber, they're very confused about what that could mean. Typically, people refer to it as textile work. I specifically work mostly in embroidery. I also do some weaving and I do some punch needle, not very well, but but I'm learning and I'm experimenting. So yeah, that's mostly the style of the medium that I work in is fiber.
That's awesome. Do you have some examples of your work that you could show us?
I do have some examples of my work. So I primarily for the last couple of years is abstractions of landscape. And so here I can even bring this closer too. So there's lots of repetition. I feel like I really thrive off of having, and you can kind of see all of the little bits in the back because you can see my hand. I really thrive off of creating work that has lots of repetition and lots of like sort of meticulous stitch work. So this in particular is meant to mimic a kind of like snowy mountainous landscape. And for me, these kinds of angles that happen in the mountains, I'm from Massachusetts originally, and we don't have mountains like we do in Utah. and and so for me, I have always had this real fascination since I moved here in 2016 with these sort of angles that catch the snow and the light in a very specific way. And so for me, this was one of the pieces that I really wanted to, focus on and think about as far as being a mountain landscape. Put this guy down. And here's another landscape.
Oh, cool.
And forgive me, the lighting, that might be a little bit better. I think a lot about wheat and a lot about fields and a lot about agriculture. Because, this series that I was working on, it was meant to be a show that really commented on the way that some landscapes are disappearing from our planet, due to deforestation, due to changes in agricultural needs, due to climate change, lots of things like that. And so for me, this was another landscape where I was thinking, when I fly, I look down and I have this real interest in the sort of like almost like quilted patterns that you see of landscapes. And so for me, this was one of those pieces that I was like, some of this rural landscape is really disappearing as well. Yeah.
Oh, that's so great. And I love hearing kind of the inspiration behind the piece too, and both the like conceptual inspiration, but also that visual inspiration of looking down on the landscape. That's so cool.
Thanks.
Um, why did you choose to be an artist, and where did your interest in art begin?
That's a really good question. I don't know if we choose to be artists. I think that people who make things are drawn to making things, and that can look a lot of different ways. That can look like performance, that can look like painting, that can look like collaging, that could look like lots of different kinds of things. I have a friend who's a woodworker, and that for me, I'm not drawn to that, I think that if you are an artist, it's not because you made an active choice. I think it's because you had this like deep desire to make something, and that was a way to express yourself. Um, and I make the things that I make, I have this really long sort of lineage of the women on both sides of my family, um, who sew, who used to knit and crochet and make lace. Making lace is an incredibly like tedious and meticulous process, and it is not for me, but I have always had women in my family doing this kind of work. And from a very, very young age, my mom taught me to sew, just some like basic stitches. She's not really an embroiderer, but she has a lot of talent and a lot of creativity in, using the sewing machine and in knitting and crocheting. And I sort of just fell in love with it from the very beginning. I love that like tactile nature of being able to hold my base material and also hold the thing that I'm moving into the base material. So for me, it was really like, in the same way that farmers or people on different landscapes like have this lineage, this history of their own families. This is sort of like my lineage, and it's just the thing that I was drawn to because it was the thing that I was introduced to from a really early age. I'm a terrible painter, but that's okay though. I think that, I don't think we have to be like a master of all skills. I think that once you're drawn to something, that's the thing that you can move toward.
Yeah, that's so great. And I think the note about medium is great too, especially for high school students who are experimenting with lots of different mediums. If there's one that you're especially drawn to, maybe take note of that, or one that you feel like especially good at. It's great to experiment with lots of things, especially as a student, but it doesn't mean you have to be great at all kinds of art making.
Yeah, and if you don't mind me adding to that too, Emily, I think, there are lots of other media outside of the things that were taught in high school. When I was in high school, it was like acrylic, oil, charcoal, and like other kinds of drawing. And we never ever touched on anything that was non-traditional. We never really did any collage. We definitely didn't do any fiber work, outside of maybe like an art history appreciation of weaving or of, ceramic. That's another one that gets taught a lot, but I think that there are so many things that can be done without limitation. So again, yeah, for high school students, I think it's really important to know that the things that maybe you're being pushed into might not be the thing that you're drawn to, but you can still feel that creative energy, and you can still feel like your medium is out there somewhere, and feel free to experiment with lots of different kinds of things. There are artists making the weirdest things in the world with the weirdest materials, and they're incredible. It's incredible to watch people like manipulate steel and manipulate paper mache.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great note, especially if you're in a high school that doesn't offer a lot of options in terms of art and visual arts. There are so many different materials out there. That's a great reminder for the students. So Danielle, what has been your career path with art, and how did you decide which career paths to pursue?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, what I currently do, I am a curator at Salt Lake Community College. We have 2 exhibition spaces. And before that, I was working at the museums at Union Station. There are 4 museums there, and I was sort of the programming coordinator there. And then prior to that, I went to grad school at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And I was there for a writing degree, but because it's an art and design school, you really have a lot of flexibility in the work that you're doing, the courses that you're taking. And so I actually took a lot of visual art courses, some curatorial courses, and courses focused on collecting art too. Not like as a person, but as an institution. And so I didn't really recognize that I was drawn to curatorial work until I went to grad school, and until I had an opportunity to sort of curate smaller shows, curate shows that were sort of a cross between writing and visual art. And all the while I was still making fiber work. I was still making these sort of like larger embroideries. And I think what's really important is when I was in high school, I really wanted to go to art school for college. For undergrad, I did not end up going to art school for undergrad, but my parents were really adamant that, you just couldn't get a job coming out of art school. I'm here to tell you that's not true. I'm here to tell you that, there are lots of different kinds of career paths for creative people, and could be curatorial work like I'm doing. It can be sort of like graphic designer. Every institution in the world needs a graphic designer. Every business needs a graphic designer. Creative directors for magazines, stores hire creative directors. I remember going to school with lots of people who were working for Anthropologie and like the design of their stores. And I didn't pay close enough attention until I was in grad school, realizing that there were these whole host of jobs that were creatively driven. And I think that despite wanting, whether you want to go into a sort of creative path or not, like having that creative energy in you and having that knowledge of how to put a project forth, how to think conceptually, how to make projects happen, like that's a translatable skill to really any career. So the way my career path worked is that I sort of continued to ask for more responsibility and continued to ask for more curatorial responsibility. I was doing very small curatorial things in grad school. And then when I moved to Utah in 2016, at Union Station, I was not the curator. I was not the exhibitions lead, and just kept kind of asking for more responsibility. And I think that once you show people that you can perform the duties that they have expected of you, and once you show them you can have this like creative idea and follow through with it, you start, that's kind of a way to like, I hate to say like build your portfolio, because it's really not like the visual portfolio, but it's a way to continue to build your career portfolio.
Yeah, that's so smart and such good advice, that if you find something you're interested in, to just ask for more ways to do it. And I think especially for students in high school or college, if you're really interested in curatorial work, I always think it's good to just start curating things in even informal spaces with your friends or with other artists, and I think Danielle's advice to just take that initiative and be proactive about finding the work you want to do is really smart.
And this idea of like informal spaces too, I think of Tiny Art Show, and I think they're based in Provo. Tiny Art Show is such a wonderful example, because they are kind of just finding these like normal spaces, these shop spaces. Sorry, the light is a little crazy. These shop spaces, these street spaces in bigger galleries, to make very tiny works. Like they have this kind of like niche concept, but it's bringing art to people, and making it feel more accessible. Because I think that larger museum settings, I mean, you and I think both know this, like larger museum and gallery settings can feel quite intimidating. The MoMA and the Met feel intimidating because it's like, oh wow, there's like Picasso's in here, and there's like, all these giant names in art that are present, and it can feel a little intimidating. And so just starting to make a curatorial space of your own, is I think a wonderful sort of like way to start.
Yeah, definitely. And Tiny Art Show is a great example. If you haven't seen them, you can find their Instagram. I think it is just Tiny Art Show.
I think so, yeah.
And the woman who runs that, her name's McKay Linker-Bayer, and she's a high school art teacher too at the Walden School. So it's a great thing for teachers and students alike to look into. What is your artistic process, Danielle, and how long does it take you to finish a typical piece?
That's a great question. It takes me a while to think about what kinds of work I want to make. I think right now I'm still sort of on this journey of thinking about landscape. I have a few pieces up right now at UMocha that are sort of these like little mini quilts that are made out of pieces that I've dyed with avocado or with indigo. And the blue of the indigo sort of looks like tributaries of a river. And, continuing to still think about how does each process that I use, like how can it continue to push the concept that I've been thinking about. I have behind me, it's in a plastic bag and I could be caring for it better. It's a piece of like dried hornet nest that I found walking my dog. Very strange. If they don't go near hornets, but if they're all gone and they've abandoned the nests, that's chill. You can go for that. But it's like, and there's a little hornet butt just sticking out of one of the holes. Like I feel bad for it. Like I RIP that hornet, but I scooped that up, and I have really been thinking a lot about, because I work so much with repetition and the repetition of shapes and stitches. I have been kind of obsessing over this hornet nest, because I mean, talk about the repetition of nature. Like that is one of the most perfect examples. And so I'm not just keeping it to keep it. I really want to incorporate it into a piece. And I've incorporated lots of moss and other natural elements into pieces. I think for me, the process starts with, okay, these are the materials that I'm really interested in incorporating and really interested in thinking about. And then this is the larger picture of what I'm thinking. I don't really sketch anything out, which I probably should. But that's just not my process. And as far as how long things take me, oh my gosh, that could really differ, because if you're really feeling something, if you have like a pretty clear vision, I'm sure you can see this piece behind me. There's also a sketch of it that I did way, way early and then turned it into that. And that took me probably 2 weeks. It's just a lot of stitching. And also I have a full-time job. So I'm not just like, I think there are a lot of artists that are lucky to be doing this full-time, and that's awesome. That is not my circumstance. So it can take me like, a couple weeks, or it can take me, 6 months.
And I think that's normal for a lot of artists, that it can kind of vary from piece to piece and what the process is on that piece.
Yeah.
Have you always created the same type of artwork, or has your style changed throughout your career?
I think that I kind of move between weaving, embroidery, and quilting quite a bit. So I guess maybe style, like those are different styles, but I see them sort of under the same umbrella. And I think if you're an artist, like whatever medium you pick up, it's like if you're making stuff that looks like other things that you're making in different media, that's your style, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be that weaving is a style. It doesn't need to be that embroidery is a style. It can be that you as an artist have a specific style. I'm trying to think about some painters that I know who can work between oil and acrylic, and then maybe they're drawing too. And a lot of that still doesn't have to be, is within the same style, because it's that person making it. And I think your style is driven by the things that fascinate you most, and the things that you're drawn to, like as far as conceptually, or just, the images that you see in your world that you want to put onto the canvas or onto whatever medium you're using. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And for students who are interested in trying fiber arts or embroidery or weaving, or do you have any tips or tricks for them? What places to start, cool techniques to try out?
Yeah, that's a great question, because like I said earlier, high schools really aren't, at least they weren't when I was going to high school 100 million years ago. But I think that there are always YouTube videos. I hate to just say like go to a YouTube video, but if you don't have resources, like the internet is your best friend. I also think just picking stuff up and playing with it is really wonderful. There are lots of books about embroidery, lots of books about weaving. There are whole YouTube channels that are just there to teach you how to weave, either on like a lap loom or a floor loom, depending on what you have access to. And then also, there are plenty of organizations in Utah in particular that have workshops. So maybe right now is a weirder time for stuff like that, but I'm thinking of like Bountiful Davis Art Center, thinking of the University of Utah and Weber State both have sort of like continuing education workshops that I've taught in, both embroidery and weaving that I've taught in. That could definitely be the same for BYU and UVU if you live closer down south. So like not, not St. George, but like, south of Salt Lake. I think it's just about looking for the opportunity and looking for the workshop, and because it might not come to you. It might not just naturally come to you. It might be one of those things that you really have to seek out.
Yeah. That's, again, kind of to your advice earlier, to be proactive and seek out those opportunities that interest you. And there's a lot of options out there if you're interested. As you've developed as an artist and as a professional, how have you learned to have confidence in your artwork? Did you ever struggle with kind of imposter syndrome? How do you stop, and how do these students stop comparing themselves to other artists and getting that kind of crippling self-doubt?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm past it, to be honest with you. I feel very, very lucky to be in this show at UMOCA that's happening right now, Material Issues. Even walking around, I had some imposter syndrome where I was like, oh my gosh, I know this artist. Oh my gosh, their work's in this show. If I'm honest, I don't know if that comparison has stopped for me. But I think a way to sort of move past that, like, is my art good enough? Is my art something that people want to see? I think a way to move past that is to just continue to make things. And I don't think that art has to be for anybody but you. I really don't. I think that if you are drawn to making, and if you are drawn to making in a specific medium, that can be for you. If you have aspirations to show that work, or to have that work be in a gallery, or have that work, to like, blow up on Instagram, I think that the real practice is in continuing to make and getting better and better. You don't wake up one day and start embroidering and you're, a master embroiderer. I think that the practice, the everyday repetition, and maybe not every day, but like the when you can repetition is really, really critical. And understanding your style and developing your style over time, that doesn't happen either, like just like that. It takes a long time, and it takes, again, that patience and that skill building that you have to build up for a length of time too. I think when I think about my career and I think about the imposter syndrome, because I'm lucky to know so many curators, Chicago and here, and you and so many other people that I really admire and whose opinion I trust curatorially. I think for me, it was I've always been really driven to create spaces that hold work that really hasn't been shown in traditional spaces before. And so right now at Slick, we're having, I want to say it's our first full showing of work by Pacific Islander artists. And it's sort of shameful to say, like, this is the first time we've shown Pacific Islander, like in a full exhibit, right? And part of that is the stuff that you inherit when you take on a new job. But I feel like I am so drawn to making the work that is shown more accessible, more inclusive, more diverse, more equitable in so many ways. And that is really what drives me in my curatorial vision. And it is what drives me in every other part of my life, is how can I support people who are not represented or have a voice but are not being heard, right? And so that for me is how I got over that imposter syndrome, where I'm like, I know that I am doing the work that I need to be doing right now, because I know that I'm supporting other artists, right? Like, that's when you're an artist, you're like, well, I don't know what to do with my own work, and helping other people figure out how to show their work has really been a driving factor for me.
Yeah, no, that's so smart. And I think having kind of a personal mission, or seeing how your work's contributing to a bigger cause or idea or value that you hold, is a great way to kind of get over the imposter syndrome and the comparing, because then it doesn't become about my work, whether it's my curatorial work or my artistic work, isn't as good as someone else's. It's just, is it contributing to this larger vision or goal that I have, or the institution that I'm working for has? And I think that's great advice. And I think, like Danielle said, I think it might be hard to believe when you're a teenager, but I do think for a lot of people that imposter syndrome holds their whole life. I know super like artists that you would consider kind of famous and like definitely have made it, and they all are often expressing doubt in their own work. And I think that's just kind of part of the artist's life in some ways, and part of making things and being creative.
Especially when you're trying something new too. There's so much doubt. I mean, I think of so many artists I've had conversations with, and I'm like, what do you mean you have any doubt about this? Like, this is amazing. I think of, Miriam Tribe is somebody who I think about all the time. She's a local artist, big on TikTok, big on Instagram now. I could say we knew her when, and it's very fun to watch her make those videos and stuff. But I've had conversations with her where she's expressed doubt in her work, or expressed like, do you think people even like want to see this? And it's like, people want to see this. And here's the hot tip. Like, even if people don't want to see it, it can be for you, because part of art is that self-expression. Part of art is that use of materials outside of your own brain, but with the power of your own brain, to make something beautiful, make something interesting, make something weird. You shouldn't feel limited in what you're making just because you're worried that other people might not like it or that it's not good enough.
Yeah, definitely. Great advice. To finish up, we just want to ask, what do you wish you knew in high school about creating art? And if you have any advice for the high school students listening to this.
So many things. There are so many things I wish I knew in high school. Oh boy. I think creatively, like I said, my parents really discouraged me from going to art school, but it didn't, when I was an undergrad, I definitely took some time away from making things because I felt like I had other pursuits happening. I think that, it sounds kind of sappy, but like, you need to kind of be on the journey that you're on. And you kind of need to, even if you have to step away from making things, even if you have to, even if you feel drawn to like using materials that are considered non-traditional, you kind of just have to be on the journey that you're on, because I don't think I would be making things. I don't think I would be curating shows if I hadn't just been on the journey. And again, that feels really sappy and very like, let's make a Disney film together. But I think a lot about how, my undergrad career, I have a degree in political science and one in creative writing. And then when I followed that creative writing path, it took me to SAIC and opened up all these curatorial doors for me. And it helped me understand what I loved about curating work, and what I loved about working with other artists and about making work myself. And yeah, I absolutely had imposter syndrome when I was in grad school, because there were people who were really there to like make work. That was their whole purpose in being in grad school. And I was just sort of there to write and to also make some work. And for me, if I hadn't sort of like followed the journey that I was propelling myself toward, I don't think I would be doing what I do right now. And as far as high school goes, I know that right now can feel like the most definitive time of your life. And I am here to tell you it is 100% not. It is, your 20s aren't, your 30s aren't, like your whole life is definitive, right? Like it doesn't have to be this stretch of 10 years, this stretch of 4 years, doesn't even have to be college. You don't have to go to college if that's not your plan, if that's not for you. Like, I believe that education is for everybody, but I don't know if I necessarily think that what I'm saying is, I don't know what direction I was going down, but what I'm saying is that you need to make the choices that feel right for you and make the opportunities that you feel like you don't have. If you are like, I really want to curate this show of, I noticed that a bunch of my friends are like making watercolors, or we all have art class together and I would love to curate a show of the things we all made in art class. Talk to your teacher and say like, hey, I wonder if there's just like an opportunity for us to like set out some pedestals and set up some like ceramic work that we all made, or think about the way that some ceramic work talks to some watercolor. And and be thinking more about making the opportunities that you don't have, because like I said, like things may not come to you and you might need to go to them. And that for me is like the biggest piece of advice I can give is be assertive in the things that you want, and you don't have to sit idly by and watch these opportunities pass. You can make them for yourself. That is like the number one piece of advice that I give even to adults that you can't just let things happen to you. You have to make things happen for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such great advice, and I totally agree to kind of go forth and make the opportunities that you want, and feel free. I think sometimes it, especially if you don't feel very connected to like arts professionals, or it
Yeah.
feels very intimidating to talk to people like me at the Springville Museum or Danielle at Slick. Everyone is just human, and reach out. Like if there's an art institution in the city or town that you live in, or that you're interested, reach out to the staff. They would be happy to help, and you don't have to feel like it's this kind of other world that you have to like gain entrance to. People are generally really accessible and happy to help, especially with students with questions. So I think that's,
Absolutely. Yeah. I think if I could echo that, internships, sometimes institutions may not offer like formal internships, but you can absolutely shadow somebody for a day, or I mean, again, COVID is a little bit trepidatious with some of that, but there's no reason that I have to ever say no to a student who reaches out to me and says like, hey, can I just pick your brain about some stuff? It's like, of course you can pick my brain. And we call on favors to each other all the time in the curatorial world, and questions, and so don't ever feel like we're so high and mighty that you can't just like shoot us an email. There's plenty of opportunity to be had, and just taking a chance on reaching out to somebody too.
yeah, definitely. Well, Danielle, has been so great. We are so grateful that you spent the time today talking with us and with the students. Do you have any final words or things you want to say before we end?
No, thank you. And to students, good luck. It's such a weird time. And I know that high school in general can feel very weird. And so I hope that you'll make the most of the situation that you have. And I hope that you find something that you're drawn to creatively. I think that that can bring so much joy to your life. And thank you, Emily, for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.